The coffee chat is in session, and today I'm joined by Kyla Hermanson. She's our colleague from Checkpoint. Good morning, Kyla.
Good morning.
I'm not going to ask you how waking up was, because I expect you to be used to this by now.
Showering in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, shame. I forgot about that. Showering in the dark. Did you just say that?
That's exactly what happened.
Okay. Well, blame the Minister of Public Enterprises and Eskom. Avium Dila, is it the first time here?
My second time. At least this time I have coffee. But Kyle, I'm not sure about your cup. Mine is a bit cold. I don't know if it has anything to do with the load shedding.
Guys, let's stop whinging. Let's actually get on with the business of telling the country where we are at the moment. So we understand that we are on stage 4 load shedding. At least there's an update. It's down from stage 6. Quite frightening yesterday. The front page of the Pretoria News, and I think they've just captured the country's emotions very aptly. So they start from the good, and in picture there is Zozibini Tunzi, who just won Miss Universe in the early hours of yesterday morning. Then down below, the bad, and you have a candle there. It says it all. Eskom. The third headline, the ugly. And that is the terrible situation that some of our countrymen and women find themselves in, sadly, who live in informal settlements.
And that is all in one day, Xoli. Woke up to the good news, of course, of Zozibini Tunzi winning Miss Universe yesterday, only to sleep to devastating news of stage 6 load shedding, unprecedented charted territory that we're in at the moment in terms of Eskom and its load shedding. The impact, economic impact that load shedding will have is only devastating, because we do understand from the stages that we've previously had. Stage 2, for example, it cost the country 2 billion rands per day. Stage 4 cost the country 4 billion rands per day. Stage 6, I'm imagining it could be more than that 6 billion rand per day, because what production is going to happen, for example, at your factories if electricity goes on and off? And it takes a lot to power up some of these machines in these big factories. So I'm assuming it'll cost more than that 6 billion rand per day to the economy.
Can you imagine? Kyla, in fact, whilst Aviwa talks about what this load shedding is going to cost the country, one of the other pages, or one of the front pages of the newspapers this morning, it's not particularly the ones that we're looking at, but it talks about how mining companies were told to shut down, and you already have some economists that are suggesting that the country has just been condemned to a recession. Are we likely to climb out of this situation, or having escaped a recession, you think?
I mean, I don't think it's looking good. I think if you look at the knock-on effect of rolling blackouts, you're already looking at unprecedentedly high levels of unemployment. And then if you have massive industries like mines saying that it's, they might shut down, or they're going to have to lay off thousands and thousands of workers, I don't see how those two combined will yield a situation where we climb out of a possible recession. I don't think it's looking good.
Viewer, if we look at the front page of the Mercury newspaper down in KZN, their main headline there, I think it absolutely captures what South Africans ought to be asking of the leadership of the country. So the headline goes, rolling blackouts blow to economy. Mr. President, Minister Gordon, SA demands answers on the energy crisis.
If you go on to read that article, you'll see there they've shared a number of tweets from prominent people around the country, basically demanding that leadership from the president, a statement or a speech, because it goes on to say that at instances of such a nature, a president would come out and effectively talk to the country just to address them.
Can I just say something to you quickly? I'm sorry to cut in, but the president, you are aware, he's on his way out of the country today.
Traveling,
going to Egypt.
It's something that I heard from my colleague.
There are more important matters in Egypt.
He hasn't cancelled his trip yet.
In stage 6. What more important matters could there be than the crisis that we're in at the moment? We heard even from some of those tweets, Iraj Abedian, suggesting that SAA might follow, Eskom might follow the path of SAA, who is currently on business rescue at the moment.
In fact, you yesterday were covering the story in totality of the country's state-owned entities. Your focus was on SAA, which is currently under business rescue. Just flesh out for us what the different options are going to be for this company now that it's under business rescue. Can it actually be rescued?
Well, there are three outcomes of business rescue, basically. The first one is successful rescue, which is, as the name suggests, it is back in business. The company operating, limited jobs are lost, and creditors are essentially paid the bulk of their debt. The second outcome that we could possibly see is an orderly wind down. Now, there, more jobs could be slashed, and parts of the company itself could be sold off. We do understand SAA has parts such as SAA Technical, which is actually doing quite well, your Mangos and Air Chefs. But what I've been hearing there is that the actually main body of SAA will not survive this particular business rescue. The third option, and the most dreadful option, is liquidation itself. There, all the assets get sold off on auction, and basically everyone loses their jobs. So, in speaking to some of the experts yesterday, I spoke to Marius van Tonda, who is a business rescue practitioner, suggesting that we could see possibly a mix of option one, a successful rescue, and as well as an orderly wind down, which means that some jobs would be slashed. To him, he projected that about 30% of those some 10,000 jobs that SAA has could be lost in the process.
Carla, the flood situation, it's terrible. I mean, if a whole hotel can be flooded, how much more for the citizens who live in informal settlements, and you just see the water sliding off and basically just drenching every other structure. That front page of the Pretoria News, if that picture were to come up, look at that. Look at that Centurion Hotel. It's a terrible situation. How do you think people there are coping?
I mean, it's terrifying. If you look at what you were saying now, the front page of the Pretoria News, I mean, these shacks are
it's estimated
fully
about 700
submerged. Yeah, I mean, you can hardly even see the front door, and you can see these onlookers who I imagine probably, some of them reside in this informal settlement, have gotten to some kind of height, and they're looking on to their entire, all their homes and well-being just getting swept away. And I remember seeing yesterday also an NCA camera person captured this car in Centurion sort of bobbing along in the water past the hotel.
And it shows you just how powerful water can be if a whole vehicle will float on water. It tells you just how unsafe that situation is. Talking about shelters, you are going to focus today on victims of gender-based violence, and in particular their sheltering. What exactly are you exploring today on
Yes,
Checkpoint?
so today is actually the official last day of 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. And I think, as we've seen most years, it's kind of this ironic 16-day period where nothing really changes, and in some instances there's even, it feels, heightened levels of violence against women and children during this period. So what we're looking at is a shelter called Aquila Timber. It's Joburg's flagship shelter for survivors of gender-based violence, which sounds wonderful, but in reality, there's been a lot of complaints in the last sort of 2 to 3 years that they have been trying to evict some of the survivors that reside in the shelter. Mm-hmm. So in South Africa, there isn't currently any legislation that says this is your mandated period that, by law you're allowed to stay in a shelter for. So they all just sort of, it's rule of thumb, whatever each shelter wants to do. This shelter is 6 months with a possible 3-month extension. The issue, though, is when you exceed your 9 months, you still can't just get chucked out on the streets. In South Africa, you have to bring a court application, you have to provide alternative accommodation. And this shelter stands accused in the past of simply just throwing people on the streets, throwing out their belongings, shutting the door, locking the door, and then that's it.
This shelter is run under whose authority?
It's the Department of Community Safety. Yeah. So what is happening now is that the Center for Applied Legal Studies, which is based at Wits University, is trying to, so they've defended women against those illegal evictions in the past.
Yeah.
And now they've almost sort of forced the shelter to seek court, to go to the courts and actually evict people in the proper way that you would evict people. But at the same time, Carl's argument is that rather as a country, instead of evicting people, we should be looking at developing transitional housing so that there's a stopgap measure for these women, for these survivors, so that they don't simply go back to their perpetrators.
You've actually spoken to some of the victims of these evictions. Let's have a listen to one of the people that you spoke to.
So that's all I said. I was like, I'm part of the LGBTQIA. And that was it. After that, it was like, I don't know what they did. They just made the assumption. They joined the dots and it was done. So within a couple of weeks, it was just a question of now, like, sorry, the ladies here don't feel comfortable with you being here. At some stage, one of the children came up to me and actually told me that they were called aside and they were asked if I had taken off their clothes or touched them in an appropriate way. And I was like, who said that? Like, who would suggest something like that? And this boy says to me, no, like, someone said that maybe you did that to us. So they asked all of us that. And I wondered, like, so this, like, immediately, I guess the assumption is, if you are gay or transgender, that you're some kind of pedophile, that you are after people's children. We don't care what you've got to say, just pack your things and go. We don't want you here. Like within 3 days, effective immediately, we don't want you in this shelter. You're a trans woman and you're not even supposed to be here to begin with. We're not even supposed to be having this conversation. How am I any less human than everybody else?
Terrible situation. What's the response from the authorities, the department specifically, that is the custodian of this shelter?
So that specific bite that you've just seen, that's Sia Hlongo, she was evicted in 2017. And despite the shelter saying that they've got a very robust LGBTI policy, they don't discriminate, she was
clearly
living proof that that is not necessarily the truth. So government at the moment is, their main reason for trying to evict people who've overstayed the 9 months or the 6 months is that by being there, they are depriving other survivors of gender-based violence of space in the shelter. They're also trying to tweak it and say, no, it's not an eviction. They've signed a contract, so when their contracted time ends, we make them leave. So I've got another bite. It's with Mr. Sipho Tanjekwayo. So he's a representative for Department of Community Safety. And this is what he had to say about Sia's case specifically.
Okay.
Received all kinds of clients, and we don't even judge them based on their sexuality or gender.
Then why did you evict a transgender woman, a rape survivor, in 2017?
You still call it a eviction when I'm trying to say to you that sometimes when you deal with clients, they reach a particular level where they must exit the shelter.
She hadn't been there for 6 months yet.
Yes, but
it was found out that she's transgender, and your staff were not happy with that, and then your staff told her to leave.
I don't want to discuss a particular case of a particular person because I think when we do our work, we also sign a lot of confidentiality matters. So I'm not going to discuss a particular case.
Yeah, it's a frightening situation. Colleagues, thank you very much. So you can catch a Checkpoint at 9:30 this evening. That's when this episode will premiere.
Yep.
All right. Kyla Hermanson, our colleague from Checkpoint, thank you very much for coming to talk to us on the coffee chat. Mr. Mtila, thank you very much. All right.